I lost somebody very close to me very recently. And so I wanted to talk about grief and kind of describe what the process has been for me and what I've become aware of through the process. And hopefully that can help somebody else that's going through the loss of a loved one or somebody that's very close to them as well. And of course, I want to take a very spiritual perspective on the whole thing, because I think that all the work that I've done inwardly to this point has, I don't want to say prepared me, but has given me the opportunity to really become aware of all the different processes that seem to sprout up when you're grieving a loss of a loved one. And grief has been described by therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists a lot, and I'm not even going to pretend to have that level of intricacy, but I'm just going to speak very personally about what I've seen through my grieving process, and what I think has been helpful in getting through the process, which I'm still going through. When my loved one died, the first thing I felt was nothing. There's absolutely nothing. It was a very sudden event. And I thought, I had this kind of hope that I had done so much inner work with myself that maybe I wouldn't feel anything. Maybe I would simply accept the reality of this person being gone, and I would sort of get a freebie, or it's sort of some sort of massive payout because of all the work that I've done inwardly. But that was short-lived. I was probably in shock, and then came the tears. And came tears for months now. And it's funny when you're crying and the family is there with you. They want to do whatever they can do to help you through the process. And I'm not sure that anybody can help you get through the grieving process or work your way through the grieving process. I really feel like the only way that one can understand grief and work through it is by paying attention to themselves. And so, one of the first things that happens when you're just so sad is that people want to fix that sadness, and you want to fix that sadness. And people offer you all sorts of platitudes, all sorts of beliefs and opinions about how to handle your grieving. And maybe you read a book or two yourself on how to handle grieving. And that's all theoretical. And, your mind wants to figure out a way to handle your grief. That's how we respond to our grief. We want to try to maybe control our grief. We want to sometimes escape from our grief. Maybe all of the grieving you're doing, and you start thinking about, I really wouldn't mind a few drinks, or, I really want to just watch 1,000 Netflix shows and just try to kind of escape from the grieving process. And so, as in, everything spiritual, there's the central problem, the primary problem, which is the loss of that person and the sorrow of that loss. And then there's the ways that we respond to that sorrow. And so, to me, the most important thing has been to become aware of these processes in my mind, passively aware of not just my grief and sorrow over the loss, but all of the different ways that I respond to this fact that the person is no longer here. And then the response to that response, which is how I'm going to handle the grief. The grief comes in different ways, as pure sorrow about the loss, this feeling of missing the person, maybe sometimes anger towards yourself or the person or other people. There are lots of ways that we respond to the fact that somebody's gone. And we really need to become aware of those. And I've become aware of a lot of how I've responded to this circumstance. And this is not a technique. These are real feelings. These are real efforts to handle this circumstance. So to really feel the sadness is key. And to feel the sadness without responding to that with an attempt to fix it, control it, run away from it, analyze it, learn from it. All of these are secondary thought processes that address the primary issue, which is this great sorrow. And what is that sorrow? Well, to me, it seems like I'm saddest when I remember that fact that this person is no longer here. And I simply cannot accept that fact. It's a feeling of no. It's an effort and a feeling of no. And sometimes there are words, I can't believe this. This couldn't have happened. But a lot of times it's sort of an implied thought. And from there is just avoidance, an attempt to avoid the fact that the person is no longer here. So I think that if I can become aware of that fact as it arises, just that, not respond to it in any way, then it lessens over time. And it doesn't mean that it's going to happen right away. And who knows how long it will take. But there's something really beautiful about feeling that feeling as it is. So is it possible to be just purely aware of your sorrow, of your suffering? I think it is. It seems to me that it is. But like I said before, a lot of times people jump from that to somewhere else. It's too painful. And so if we're not totally aware of that, if we do jump off into ways to try to handle our suffering, cope with our suffering, run to support groups, run to therapists, I'm not saying you shouldn't do any of that, but I think it's certainly healthy to sort of understand internally where the motivation for that type of help comes from. But if we're not purely aware of our sorrow because we're making these other efforts to try to cope, then probably the first step is to look at those coping mechanisms without judgment and to become aware of that first. And if you can become aware of that, then that can sort of die down and you can sort of become more aware of the actual suffering